Hi, this is Amanda.
And this is Jen.
And you're listening to Just This, a podcast that explores everything around being and becoming a mother or parent.
We're excited to have you join us as we dive into the practical details as well as the unseen energetics on topics that span from preconception to years after birth.
So we're back to talk about more acupressure, acupuncture, and we have already dove into acupressure and acupuncture during pregnancy. We broke it into 3 parts so we can talk about pregnancy, pre-pregnancy, and postpartum. And today we're going to go into the pre-pregnancy acupressure, acupuncture phase.
Yeah.
If you haven't listened to the pregnancy one because you're not there yet, it might be worth going and listening to it just because we do cover in that one a little bit more about the difference between acupressure and acupuncture and just some of the more basic questions in there about when to choose what and some of those aspects of it. So it's worth listening to even if you're not pregnant yet. It's a great one if you are trying to get pregnant, just because you will be there eventually and you're getting ahead of the game for that. But today we're going to focus more of the specifics for fertility and pre-pregnancy. And this is something Jen specializes in. So if you're trying to get pregnant, definitely we'll link to her personal website in the show notes and be sure to reach out to her. So do you have a specific place you want to start with this, or do you want me to just start firing some questions?
You can fire questions. Let's start with you firing some questions, and then we'll go from there.
I think a good place to start is just how acupressure and acupuncture is specifically used to help with fertility. And I'm sure this is going to maybe look different depending on where you are with your cycle or how long you've been trying. So I think just starting with a general kind of question of how is this modality specifically used to help with fertility?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of people will use acupuncture, probably not so much acupressure, but acupuncture for sure in conjunction with other fertility methods such as IVF, IUI, those type of things. And acupuncture basically it works with the body system and ultimately tries to balance the body, right? There's about 3% of the population that actually cannot get pregnant just from physical reasons. And then, of course, I'm talking about people that are in the pregnancy window, right? I'm not talking about 60-year-olds or something like that. But people that are within the fertility window, only about 3% actually can't get pregnant due to physical things. So I always like to state that. And then besides that, our bodies are meant to be fertile and have a baby. So acupuncture just kind of works with the body and essentially rebalances it and gets it back into a state of fertileness.
So when you're saying that only 3% of the population actually has a physical reason that they can't get pregnant, then oftentimes are you the other reasons that people can't get pregnant? Is it more in the energetics? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, energetics. It could be PCOS, right? Polycystic ovarian cyst, those type of things. So those are physical attributes, but prior to having PCOS, they could still get pregnant. So those type of things can come up too. That's just strictly females when we're talking about fertility, but obviously it takes two to tango in the baby making world. So just because you're fertile doesn't mean that your partner is too. And that's actually something that even some fertility specialists require, that the partner actually gets checked or comes in to at least some consultation or treatment, because sometimes it's actually not the females and those are the ones that show up to the appointments, when in reality it's maybe slower moving sperm or not enough or things in that sense too. So
And acupuncture and potentially acupressure can help with some of these issues and logistics.
yes, absolutely. Along with the energetic aspect, because Chinese medicine, unlike Western medicine, they do look at everything. Every aspect of your life is looked at, not just your body, but what you're eating, your exercise. So in our Western culture, we think like running is exercise, But more Eastern Chinese medicine, we're talking like movement essentially. So they do more Tai Chi and Qigong, which is breathing and gentle movement exercises. So I just tell clients movement because when we think exercise, we think like super sweating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Movement. So what you eat, how you're breathing, which is also, if you think about it, when we're stressed out a lot, we don't breathe. And even if you do meditations or even guided meditations, they kind of remind you like, hey, don't forget to breathe. And you a lot of times will notice that actually I'm not breathing in a way that's deeper and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I want to point out here, you mentioned that acupuncture can be done in conjunction with other fertility methods. I don't know how you want to put it, like IVF and stuff like that. But oftentimes I find that people who are wanting to get pregnant, have been trying for a few months and haven't been able to, it's actually a first step. And it's a really great first step to take before you even go to a doctor or potentially look at exploring some of these other methods, unless you have to, which depending on your situation, you might have to. But oftentimes I know a lot of people who use acupuncture as their first step, and then they never have to get to that second step of going through more of our Western methods of becoming pregnant, which
Exactly.
oftentimes are more invasive and a little bit just harder on the body in general,
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
lengthier to deal with, and often way more expensive.
Way more
expensive.
Yes. Yeah. You could get acupuncture pretty regularly for the amount that you'd pay for IVF, and IUI is a little bit cheaper, but still it's a lot higher for sure.
Yeah. So how long should somebody wait, or should somebody wait at all if they are trying to get pregnant, or should they come right away, or should they go ahead and see how things go for a couple months and then come in? We can start with that. And then on top of that, once somebody comes in, what do you find are usually the biggest kind of blocks that you encounter with people, and how do you work with them to incorporate acupuncture and acupressure? And then even further from that, kind of a three-part here.
Okay.
Once you are working with them, do you have like quote unquote homework for them when they're at home? Or is there stuff that they're doing in conjunction with the acupuncture that you're doing? And or if somebody doesn't want to do the acupuncture, I know we talked about this with the pregnancy one. Are there certain ways that you can work with them without the pins? You call them pins, right?
Taps, yeah, but pins, I like that. Pins.
Taps. Without the
Pin you
taps.
down.
Yeah.
So for your first question, which was what I see when people come in, or recommendations I have for them, it really depends on what is happening for people. I'd say most of the time, I actually need clients to do less because it's causing a lot of stress, and the body needs to generally be in a more relaxed state. We can't be on stress levels all the time and expect to get pregnant. Some people will, of course, but if someone is struggling to get pregnant, then that's one thing we want to eliminate is stress. And in our culture, we have a tendency to be overdoing, right? I'm eating right. I'm eating all the protein, and I'm checking my ovulation, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And it's like on and on and on top of normal life living. So usually that stress is the number one thing I would say is the biggest block to a lot of fertility clients is stress and calming down and relaxing. And we talked about it before in our other podcast, which is just really feeling what it would be like to be a pregnant person, right? If you were pregnant, would you be doing all this stuff? Would you have the energy to do all that stuff? And really being more receptive and soft. Your first question was actually, when should they come in? Acupuncture is great for anything. So, of course, as an acupuncturist, I'm biased here and like, yeah, come in right away. And how often is really dependent on financial situations for people, where they're at on their fertility journey. Are they just starting out? Do they really want to get pregnant? There's a lot of questions that determine how often I'll see them. But coming in even when you want to start is great, because I even tell people that for babies that don't want to come for acupuncture induction, so to speak, it's so helpful if they have had acupuncture before, because the body already knows what to do. It knows what it's like. And so when I go to give needles for those type or taps for those type of situations, the ones that have had acupuncture before, my rate of effectiveness is way higher than someone that has never ever had acupuncture and is coming in trying to get labor going. So that's why I always recommend acupuncture too. And then for the stress, I would say the biggest blockage is stress. So we come in, a client will come in, we'll just assess where their menstrual cycle is, ovulation. I get the whole thing, and then kind of go from there about what's happening. Every person is different, so my treatments are always specialized and customized to that. But I'd say ultimately stress is a big one. And it's that whole concept of people struggling with fertility. I'm sure you've heard the story. They're struggling, and so they have their baby. They finally have it IVF, blah, blah, blah. And then the doctor's like, hey, because you had so much problem, I recommend you trying early. And of course, immediately when they start trying, they get pregnant again. And a lot of times too, it's when they give up. So some of my top secret stuff is go on a date with your partner and have sex. Just go out, have a date. Don't think about sex. Don't think about when you're ovulating. Just enjoy each other and get back into that state of being, right? We've talked about that before, just really being in our body because our body is meant to produce life. And then there was one more question. What was the third one? Or do you have other questions?
Yeah, well, just a comment on that. I really love that. And it's so true that we live in a very Mars-driven masculine society. And when you are trying to conceive, you need to be in your Venus, woman, female, feminine, female as much as feminine receptivity. That's a huge energetic component that acupuncture help balance, that most of us have a hard time in our society leaning into, because there is a percentage of our population that it comes very naturally, but we are not raised in a culture that embraces the feminine. It embraces very masculine patterns, very masculine schedules, and that is really hard to decondition ourselves from. And what's fascinating that you said there is even our approach to fertility is we're coming from a masculine approach to fertility, and that a masculine on top of masculine, while it works sometimes, like you said, for a lot of people won't work. It's like you need the two sides of the magnet in order for things to come together. And it stood out to me.
And yeah, what was the third question?
The third question, I think and that wraps into what you answered, is do you often give people homework or things to do in conjunction with acupuncture that you might be doing when you're doing the acupuncture, saying, okay, go home, maybe massage these points or that points. But it sounds like for the most part, no, you're just telling people, just relax, relax.
Do
And
less.
so what is the acupuncture doing then in conjunction with your suggestion to just relax? Generally, what are the points that it's working on, and what is it doing to the body?
So it kind of depends again on the person, but generally reducing stress, number one. We're all stressed, right? Modern culture is just a very stressed society. So generally working on stress, and then we're nourishing a lot too. We want to nourish the kidneys, especially because that's where the conception happens, right? That's the basis of it in Chinese medicine. And then also working, they call them the liver channels, which also flows into the fertility channels too, which is also related to stress. So we work that. And then depending on what is happening for other people, I'll also address those things because that stuff is specific and we need to address and make sure everything is balanced. The main thing that I'm pretty sure I've done across the board, I'm trying to think if there's anyone I didn't do to, is moxa on the belly. Chinese medicine and a lot of cultures, actually a lot of more Eastern cultures and non-Western modalities, is all about warming the womb. The womb has to be warm. You're not wearing crop tops. That whole area is just very warm because you want it warm and fertile and soft and nourished. And water is the other thing too. Sometimes they're very dehydrated. So that's part of the nourishing too, is actually getting that soil, right? When you think about a fertile soil, what are you thinking about? It's not dry and crumbly. It's got that soft and warmth, right? If you dig down into that type of soil, it is actually warmer down there in the dark. It's cool, but it's not cold, right? And so we want to make sure that the womb is warm too. It's a lot of moxa on the belly too, and the womb area to really warm it up and get babies inside there. And accepting, who wants to go to a cold environment?
My sister, when she was trying to get pregnant, worked with an acupuncturist, and they did that the first or second time she was there. They literally took her hand and put it on her womb space or right below the belly and was like, you feel this? This cold. They did a lot of moxa and also had her doing hot water bottles at home and just even a couple times a day rubbing the area or holding it with her hands. And she got pregnant pretty fast just
Yep.
from something as simple as that. She was very shocked that within a couple months she got pregnant.
And you can buy moxa sticks online. Just be careful, learn how to use them. They burn really big. You need rice to put them out. And you
Yeah,
can buy them
maybe
online,
go
that's
to
what
an
I'm doing.
acupuncturist and
Just go to
learn how to
acupuncturist.
do it
Yes,
versus just
yes,
trying to do it at
exactly.
home alone.
But I love the hot water bottles, and she probably didn't do a heating
Yeah.
pad because of the electricity. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but even those the pads that you put in the microwave or something that get heated up, because you don't really
Right.
want the electricity flowing around that area. You want to really keep it as raw and natural as possible in that
Yeah.
way. But yeah,
So question, is it beneficial or is there anything that can be done or you incorporate if only the mother or the conceiving person is the one going to get acupuncture or doing acupressure? If they're the only ones doing the Chinese medicine approach to this and the other partner is not going to do it, do you still see benefits and can that still produce results?
yeah. Again, it depends on what's going on with the partner, but even when the conceiving person comes in, I always give recommendations for them to give to their partner if they're open to it. Simple things like no tight underwear, no boxer briefs, no hot tubs, biking limited, right? All those things that push up. Basically, you don't want any heat down there for men. Actually, it's opposite. You want the flow and the coolness. So that's why there's boxers, no hot tubs, and bikes. When they sit on there, it just kind of brings up the ball sack and gets really warm. So all that stuff is a big no-no. And those are the type of things that I recommend for just a general across the board. Hey, they're not going to come in. This is what you can do. And then recommending that they relieve stress somehow too, making sure that they're not as stressed out.
I'm curious though, do you find men are energetically blocked in some way? It's interesting that for the female, it's the yin and the yang that the woman needs to have the warmth and stuff, and the man needs the cooling aspect. I love that they go together. I'm curious on the energetics side if you find that men tend to face these blocks just as much as women.
Yeah, I feel that a lot of men don't worry as much as women about it. And so blockage wise, I would say sometimes just ejaculating too much for men could also cause problems because it makes them deficient. And deficient just means not having the energy and the buildup of sperm to help. And I'm not saying to men don't have sex ever for the month until that time, but ejaculating multiple times a day or even a lot in that week could affect the energetics. And especially a lot of Chinese culture, you're smiling really big. They don't believe in having men ejaculate as much. And again, I just want to say you can have sex without ejaculating.
Yes.
But in Chinese culture, they're okay with that. They're fine with that. But it's really the ejaculation they don't like because they believe that their ejaculation is their essence. They call it the jing. So it's like their essence is being left and that depletes them. And so if you're doing that a lot, they're not cool with that. And especially nowadays with our porn accessibility, it's a lot more easy for men to do that.
If you are listening to this and you are interested and your partner's interested, so this is a thing in Tantra as well, which probably hand in hand with the Chinese philosophies of the men's ejaculation is life force energy. It's creative energy. It's to create. And when you're constantly taking that out, you're draining your body of the life force energy. And if you haven't heard of semen retention, definitely look it up. I feel it's a little bit trendy right now, maybe just in the world I'm in, and it's amazing to look at the comments of people talking about it and all the benefits men are experiencing in semen retention. And 100% you can have sex and you can even orgasm without ejaculation. And oftentimes men find that that's even more powerful orgasm than ejaculation orgasm, again, because the energetic reasoning for this is that you're depleting your body after you ejaculate. Whereas if you can retain your semen while having an orgasm, you're regenerating that into your own system. So
Yeah.
that's a side tangent. You can look into semen retention as well. But that's interesting to hear that component of it.
The other thing too, the trending word is no fab. Have you heard that?
I never heard that.
Basically, no fab. I don't know where this is on Instagram, but it's similar. It's similar to semen retention. And again, I'm not saying don't ever ejaculate, but look into it.
There's a great book I've been reading, actually. I know there's a Sexual Mastery for Men by one of the really well-known tantra teachers, but then there's another one that I'm reading right now. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I'll link a couple books in the show notes that are really great that talk about just evolved sexuality for men and specifically around multi-orgasms and semen retention. So I'll link those if people are interested. They're super fascinating.
And on the last note, we did a ritual for infertility, and I just think we should also link that here.
Yes, we'll 100% link the ritual. We've mentioned this before. We created this out of love for a friend who asked for it, and it was so much fun creating it. And then she literally got pregnant within weeks of doing it. And I really want to get her on the podcast. She has a baby now. And I'd love to get her on the podcast and have her talk about it. She did sing praises. If you're interested, we'll link it in the show notes as well. It's very, very affordable, and you can grab that or reach out to us if you'd like a customized ritual. I did want to talk about if people can't work with an acupuncturist. I still want to emphasize here that even if you're not into taps, which is the needles, that there's a lot that the acupuncturist knows and can help you with. So you can probably speak to that also, but it's worth reaching out, and you can tell them, hey, if you have a phobia of needles or the taps, or you really don't want to do them, there's so many other things you can do. And the acupuncturist has a lot of wisdom around being able to balance the body and those energetics and all these things that Jen's talking about without actually incorporating those taps. There's a ton more that you can do working with an acupuncturist. So don't let that hold you back if you are afraid of taps. That being said, we always like to give people acupressure points at home that they can practice. What you said, just the whole kind of relaxing, keeping the womb warm and relaxing as much as you can. Get our fertility ritual. It'll help you relax. Yep. Those probably would be the biggest homework takeaways. But do you have a couple of acupressure points that you are doing? We actually include a bunch of these in the fertility ritual, because one of the things that's in that ritual is doing a couples massage, and we go into a bunch of points. But do you have one or two top ones that you'd want to share?
I would say probably kidney 3, which is on the ankle. I do often. And I usually do one around the womb. So it's basically around your stomach. And again, if you're just massaging that area, like your sister was doing, you're going to be hitting those points, and you want to put a little pressure. And anywhere that you feel kind of like, oh, that feels good, just hang out there for a little bit and then continue with the massage. Make it easier.
We'll link the photo to kidney 3 in the show notes. And then just the womb, you'd say just do the womb massage.
And then if you feel a nice little area, kind of like an indent in the belly area, just hold it there for a little bit and continue. And you can look up points too on there. But if you're doing a stomach massage, you're going to be hitting them, and that's what you need. So, yeah.
How long do you see people take for starting acupuncture or starting working with Chinese medicine and then reaching to a point of pregnancy?
I'd say probably around 3 to 6 months. And that's just because, again, it depends on how often they're coming in, but the relationship has to get built with the acupuncturist a little bit. And you learn more as you go on about a client. And when we're working with fertility, we have this month, right? Each session is kind of by month, and it's based on our cycle. So when we come in and we're doing treatment, okay, this is what we did the first month and it kind of worked, or after you gave me this new information, I'm going to actually shift my treatment a little bit like that. And so I'd say anywhere, generally, averagely 3 to 6 months. And that's coming in already with infertility issues. So it's not like they've just coming in because they want to start getting pregnant. They're coming in with infertility issues from the beginning.
Are there any misconceptions about using acupuncture specifically for preparing for pregnancy that are out there that you like debunk?
That's interesting. I've never been asked that. That's a good question. I don't know. Have you heard any? I haven't really heard any.
None come to my mind, but I was just curious if there's anything that's out there. Acupuncture these days is pretty well accepted.
Yeah.
And it's covered by insurances, depending on your insurance. It's definitely covered by HSA if you have a health savings account. And we mentioned this in our pregnancy one, but to mention it again, oftentimes acupuncturists do it because they love it. Nobody's becoming an acupuncturist to get rich. So if there is a financial burden, you can talk to somebody and they will oftentimes figure out some kind of a plan to work with you. So whether that be, hey, like what's the lowest frequency that would give the highest potency for your situation, or a payment plan or things like that. Oftentimes, all of us, especially in the birth work realm, tend to want to support and are willing to be flexible and find something that feels comfortable for both parties financially.
Absolutely. And also, I just want to put a note there too that if you're starting out with acupuncture instead of doing IVF, you got to think about what your cost is with acupuncture compared to IVF, because IVF is going to be in the $10,000 to $20,000, and you're going to need a lot of acupuncture to get to that point.
Yes.
So just keep that in mind too.
I think IVF is more than that, to be honest. I think when you set up all the appointments and everything you have to do, it's easily 50,000 or more.
I would say so too.
If you're thinking about maybe I'll try $5,000 on acupuncture, and or since this is a pre-pregnancy episode, if you're thinking about getting pregnant, maybe looking when your insurance renews of bumping yourself up to that level that would cover acupuncture. Maybe that's just an extra $50 a month on your insurance plan, or $100 a month. That's what, $1,200 a year, and then you get your acupuncture covered. So that's something you can look at too.
And I just want to note in there, call and ask if they cover fertility, because sometimes they don't.
Well, but if they cover acupuncture,
yeah, you're still coding certain things. Do they have pain? Is it for fertility? Is it for whatever? And so that still gets coded to the insurance. So some insurances do not cover fertility treatments and some do. So just look it up. And as a note, if you have pain, you should go in for pain, and then also tell your acupuncturist that you're trying to get pregnant.
Add it on as a side thing. I'd say, like, I'm sure there's ways to work around this, but interesting note. Good to know.
Yes.
I want you to talk a little bit also about just you work with people virtually.
Yep.
And so how does that work? Because you're not doing acupuncture, obviously, but do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I started working virtually mainly because my son, but also because we need consistent connection sometimes. And sometimes when we're going through fertility, we don't want to be talking about it with our friends or family members. And it's also very emotional, especially if you're going through IVF and you're on hormones, and there's not only a effect on you, but also on your partner. Just kind of they're supporting and they're kind of going along, but they're also in it too, and they have their own opinions and experiences about it. And that can put a real damper on the relationship, or some challenges in the relationship, not only just on your partner, but then on you too, and the hormones. So when I work with clients, we're looking at nutrition and stress and the emotional component. So I'm just there as kind of like a sister would be, or a really good friend, to support them through on a more continuous basis. Whereas with acupuncture, they'd be coming in maybe once, twice, maybe 3 times a week, depending on how things are and financials. But in between, you're not so much in communication with them. When I work virtually with people, that's what we are. We're more connecting virtually, and then working on those stress points and those blockages in a lot more direct manner, where acupuncture, I'm giving those a little bit, but then I'm putting the needles in and letting it rest.
It's a great thing to do if you are seeing an acupuncturist. Do it together. If somebody is considering doing acupuncture once a week, and then you could work with Jen virtually, it's just like having a personal private coach, but not coach really. Like you said, it's like having the sister, but the sister that knows everything. Been through years of Chinese medicine school and really has the wisdom of being able to pinpoint what's going to specifically help you from week to week, get to that goal of conception.
Exactly. And during those times, I can give acupressure points to do for the partner to do. Keeping the stress levels down is a huge thing, and diet, that type of stuff.
Awesome. I think we hopefully covered a little bit here to get you inspired if you are trying to conceive, to explore acupuncture or to integrate acupressure. Reach out to us. We have our voicemail. We have our email that you can reach out to, justthispod@gmail.com. And then you can reach out to Jen directly if you have any direct questions for her. But you will get there if you are on your journey to conception. And if you haven't listened to it yet, go ahead and jump into the Pregnancy Acupuncture podcast. We'll link that below too, just to know what's next once you're there.
And if you have any topics you want us to discuss more, then put that in too.
Yeah. Awesome.
Hey there, amazing listeners. We just want to say a huge thank you for tuning into our convo on the Just This podcast today. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners, and your continued support means the world to us.
If you enjoyed this episode and found value in it, we would be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform or share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it too. Your reviews and shares not only motivate us, but they also help others discover our show.
We're also all about keeping the conversation going and hanging out with our incredible community. Head over to justthis.site, that's justhis.site, where you'll find additional resources, ways to connect with us, and join the conversation, plus some more goodies.
Thank you again for being a part of the Just This community. We'll be back soon. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself and embrace the wonder as you navigate this extraordinary adventure.